Welcome, everyone. This is Book to Action 2021, Defining American, Telling Your Story in 240 Words or Less. For more information on any of the programs in the Book to Action series, please visit santacruzpl.org and view our calendar. And this event is being recorded, as I mentioned. Just a few reminders, your mic is muted unless you raise your hand, and you'll see that in the lower left corner of your Zoom control bar, or if you're on a mobile device, you'll see everything kind of in reverse, so everything will be up at the top. So that's number 1 there. If you have any tech questions, please use the chat feature to chat with the host. That's number 2 down at the bottom. Again, on a mobile device, that'll be up at the top. And then finally, number 3, clicking on the reactions icon allows you to raise your hand. And as we have time during the session, the moderator will call your name when it's your turn. I'm now going to turn everything over to Diane Cowan, and she's going to introduce our facilitator and the program. Diane, go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for being here. I'm really excited about our Book to Action programs and the wonderful events that we have planned. And if you're not fully aware of all the things that are going on with the program, just exploring the book, Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen by Jose Antonio Vargas, I encourage you to visit our website to learn more about it. And I am very pleased to introduce my friend and colleague, Rachel Goodman. Rachel is the chair of the board of directors for KSQD Community Radio and a longtime radio producer. She teaches a journalism class at Cabrillo College and also teaches science communications at UCSC. She's a great musician, and we are really glad to have her here today. Please welcome Rachel Goodman.
Thank you, Diane. It's such a pleasure to be presenting to you today and being with you all. I have been teaching this storytelling workshop to my students for a number of years, where at the end of class, they get to tell a personal story. Usually they write it down and then they just speak it extemporaneously, and it's longer than 240 words. So the goal today is to have you come away with an idea for a story that you might want to submit to the KSQD program, First Person Singular, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. And I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who are here, Matilda Rand and Lori Korn, who are the producers of that program. So we will have some time to do some writing today. It's not a long time, but I'm hoping to go over kind of what makes a good short story and how do we get in touch with the meaning behind the story. There are so many stories within our lives. And one thing I've learned teaching storytelling is how validating it can be to tell your truth, to tell your family's stories. And we have so many to draw from. Sometimes people think, well, my family's been there for generations. I don't really know any stories. Well, that's a great opportunity to talk to your grandparents or your parents or anybody who's alive who might know that knowledge. There has been this huge wave of genealogy study and interest in family stories. And we actually have a program on KSQD called Family Sparks, Chispas Familiares, which celebrates family stories. And that happens once a month on, I believe, Monday nights. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. But I'm going to show you a couple of slides that kind of will get your head in the space where you might think about what would you like to tell in this very short space. I want to give a disclaimer too. I know, and you know, that 240 words is a ridiculously small amount of words to say really anything meaningful, but it can be done. It can be really powerful. And we're going to listen to a couple of examples. One of them was from one of my 16-year-old students from Russia. He told a beautiful story. I thought it was a little sad too. These don't have to have a happy ending. They could be your truth, whatever that truth is, and whatever you want to tell. This is yours. This is completely yours. So whatever you want to do with this is up to you. But please, in the back of your mind as I'm talking, think about what you would want to share with the public. Obviously, we don't want you to share anything that you're unable or willing to share. This is about what you would like to give as a gift of ideas to the community through the radio. So I'm going to share my screen for a little while and talk about what makes a good short story. Of course, we all have a novel in us, I know that, but we also have other things, maybe some smaller micro stories that might move people. So it might take me a moment to get all my screen sharing together here, but give me just a sec and I'll do that. There we go. That. And then you can tell me if you can see that.
We can.
Yay. All right. So like I said, ideally you'll come away from this short workshop with an idea or even maybe a rough draft or an outline for your family or immigration story.
Oh, excuse me, Rachel, you're flipped. You're on speaker. You're showing everyone speaker.
I'm showing what?
You're showing everyone the speaker side.
Oh, the wrong view. Is that
I
what you
don't think
think?
that's your intention. Yes.
No, it's not. Give me a sec. All right, I'm going to try that again. I don't know how that happened, but we'll work on that. Yeah, I wanted to just play slideshow from the beginning, right? So let's see if that works. Hopefully it will. Oh, there's 2 PowerPoints showing up on here. That might be why. I get it. Okay, I have 2 monitors, so that's the funny thing that happened. So let me see if this solves that problem. PowerPoint 1. Well, it didn't really solve it, but give me a sec. There we go. Maybe that's going to do it. Tell me if you can see that now. Is that the right one?
Yes, I believe so. Oh, nope.
I
It went
shouldn't have
right
done-
back to the other one.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just show it in this draft. Is that going to...
Yeah, or I can bring up your slides too if you want.
You can, except I've changed
Oh,
them.
except you changed them. Yep.
You know what I might do? I'm going to try the second screen. Sorry, guys.
It is understandable, though. I mean, we can see what you're getting across if you just want to go with that.
Let me try this. Let me see what happens. How about that?
I think that is what you're trying to go for. You just need to close out of the format background. There you go.
Oh, it worked. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Your mute,
well-
your chat is on though. So
Okay, got that. All right. There we go.
There we
Okay. Woohoo. Rock and roll. You can tell I'm a radio person, not a visual person, but we do our best. So I wanted to tell you where your story might end up. There's a program called First Person Singular, and it runs 3 times a week on KSQD, which is a brand new community radio station. I'm wearing the t-shirt that we helped birth in 2019, so it's really young. And its goal and mission is to build community through broadcasting, podcasting, and events that celebrate the uniqueness, and boy, is it unique, of Santa Cruz County. So that's our goal and our mission. And First Person Singular fits right into that because we're all about telling local stories. And these are stories from all walks of life. So if you are on the air, you will be heard all over Santa Cruz and parts of Monterey County. And it'll be heard on 90.7 FM. And it'll be streamed live on ksqd.org. So if somebody is in, for example, New Zealand, which is where somebody was the other day when I was on the radio, they actually telephoned me from New Zealand, said they were listening. So you'll be broadcast worldwide. And our mascot is a giant squid because we are KSQD. So why would you want to tell your immigration story? I think it connects us all and helps us appreciate what it means to be an American. That word is so loaded, but it's also so beautiful. And it's what we define it as, not what other people define it as. So sharing these stories can be a powerful way to build bridges, build empathy, and of course, because we are storytelling animals, we literally evolved. We survived because we could tell stories about what was edible and what wasn't edible, what animals would eat us, and so forth. And these became our mythology and the way we passed on values and culture. So we love stories, and stories help bring meaning to our lives. We all tell them around the dinner table. We just don't realize we're telling them. A lot of the stories we are told through the media are about consumption and about competition. But those aren't the only stories. And I really believe we can reclaim our stories to be more humane and to create more understanding and connection. And maybe I'm just a ridiculous idealist, but that's what I believe. So, what are the elements of a good story? What will make your story shine above all other stories? Well, it's got to have a main character. So, you got to figure out who is telling this story. Is it you? Is it your grandma? Is it your child? Is it somebody you met on a bus? You just got to think who's really going to be the main person featured here. In a moment, I'm going to play a story where it's the son talking about the mother, and he is not the main character. It's his mom. A good story will have a little hint of foreshadowing, and I'll give you some examples in a moment of what that means. A little tease, but don't give away the ending. And every good story that we've ever heard has some sort of conflict. So there's a goal. Maybe the goal is to get into college. Maybe the goal is to come to the United States. Maybe the goal is simply to get through the day. So what's the goal? And then what's the obstacle to that goal? Maybe you're trying to get married, but your spouse is stuck in Canada. So that's the conflict, right? The conflict. You have to find where that tension is. Nobody ever loved hearing a story, on television that was like this. I woke up. It was a sunny day. I ate breakfast. And then I went to work and came home and the sun set. And it was great. Like, okay, that's nice. But we don't remember that as much as we remember things that have a little bit of tension or conflict. And then, of course, at some point, that tension and conflict gets resolved. Well, how did it end? How did it resolve itself? It doesn't always end happily. It doesn't always end. Maybe it's still going on. But what was learned? And what does it all mean? One way for audio stories to capture your attention is by using imagery. So we all have these senses. We see, we hear, we feel, we taste, we smell. And even a few judiciously used pieces of vivid imagery will help your story. So, what would you like to tell a story about? This is the thing. We all have a million stories, right? My grandmother came over here as a child from Russia on a boat when she was 2. And my grandmother's name was Miriam. But when she got into school and only spoke Yiddish, they refused to use her real name, and they made her Marion because that was an American name. And she was too timid to tell them that wasn't really her name. And for years, I didn't know that was her real name. But when she claimed it, she claimed a part of herself as a Jewish immigrant from Russia that was important to her. So I always called her Miriam after I heard that story, and she was very grateful to me about that. That's just a tiny piece of who she is, but I like telling that story because it reminds us how important names can be. Can be a conflict between generations about heritage. Have you ever been at a dinner table where grandpa was talking to grandson or great-grandson, and there was a really interesting dialogue happening about what's worth saving from the old ways and what's really worth discarding? It can be a conversation with your grandma about where your family comes from. I interviewed a lot of immigrants for my documentary series, Pastures of Plenty, and I heard so many crossing stories, harrowing, ridiculously horrible, and triumphant crossing stories. People going through the desert, people coming, at night across a river. That's kind of part of the hallmark of the ways people get here. The journey itself can be a story. Sometimes looking through an old book of photographs can evoke a story you'd like to tell. That one moment where it was captured in the frame. Sometimes you can get really big. Instead of a micro story, you can tell a very big story, like what I feel being an American. There was a wonderful series called This I Believe by Jay Allison, and people told their beliefs. That's kind of a different way of presenting yourself. And then, you can talk about politics if you want. Boy, we've heard a lot about that lately. Maybe it's too abstract, but for some people, that's what they want to talk about, how this last 4 years has been as an immigrant and how the rhetoric has been so, so painful. Sometimes pain is a perfectly wonderful way to get it off your chest and share it, because so many people share that pain and it helps us feel less alone. So that's up to you. What kind of story do you want to tell? Think about that. There's no right answer. It's just, what is your truth? What is this one little slice you'd like to share with the world about yourself or one of your family members and how they relate to this whole big topic of immigration? So I always believe that there's a multitude of stories contained in a tiny story. And because you only have 240 words, and I'm going to show you and listen to you with you about what that sounds like, because these are tiny stories, you want to pick a moment in time in a way that stands in for something bigger. Maybe a little moment when someone said something to you. Was it mean? Was it beautiful? Was it strange? Sometimes that moment of meeting with someone can be cathartic and interesting. One of my students told me about being woken in the middle of the night to walk miles in Honduras to get out of her hometown because they were under threat of death. I mean, this is when she was 5, but she still remembered the story. And it was told from a 20-year-old's perspective, looking back at what that journey was like for her. These are pictures. The top picture is a group of Filipino workers in the fields of Watsonville from the collection at the Watsonville Library and the Watsonville Historical Association. And the one below are workers in a Watsonville apple packing plant. And I believe they are Croatian. There's a lot of people from different countries in our community and a multitude of amazing stories they could tell. So you got to decide who's speaking. I mentioned that before. Who is the narrator? Even if you're the narrator, but who's it about? It's good to kind of ground us. So if you're talking about your grandmother, how old was she or is she in this story? A little bit about what they look like is helpful, rather than just saying I was 18. You could say I was a scrawny little wimpy kid at 18 or whatever. Just give us a little picture so we can imagine it, because it's radio. There's no actual photos. You have to make the photo in people's mind. One way to start your story. So where do I begin? Oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. Once you've decided what you're going to tell, you can drop a little hint. So you can say something like, my grandmother always went by a name that someone else gave her. And I'll tell you Marion's real name in just a minute. But first, here's how it happened. So you drop a little mystery clue at the beginning. One of my science writing students the other day wrote, "This story starts with a mystery, a washed-up whale carcass, and some scientists." Great, I want to hear more. I have no idea what she's going to say, but it's going to be interesting. So start with something provocative so we want to keep listening. Here's another one. What if you were told your whole life you were an American, but it turns out to be a lie? So, yeah, you just want to kind of pose some sort of provocative opening to your story. The other way to make your story just pop is sensory details. So, what does it sound, taste, feel, or smell like? Was her voice like broken glass or gravel or silk? Did her cooking smell like baked bread or old fish? Was her dancing like a tropical bird or, clumsy as a horse? Was his hand as rough as an old pine board or his brow as furrowed as the rows of the corn? Were her walls crowded with paintings of France? Carved wooden shoes? What detail can you share that typifies what that person is about? Was it she always wore this rosary necklace? What was one little teeny micro detail you can tell? And it doesn't just have to be visual. It can be the smell of gefilte fish at Passover. Those are really vivid and people can relate. So this is what 240 words looks like. This is a story I'm going to play for you. So just, you don't have to read along because I don't know how to read along and play the audio at the same time, but I just wanted you to kind of see that we're talking about, I don't know how many sentences that is. It's probably like 10, 15 sentences. Short sentences are good. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a minute. I'm going to play you a couple of these, and you can kind of hear what a 240 word. And then I can also pause for a moment and take some questions after we listen to these. Does that sound good? Okay. Now, thank you so much for bearing with my technical fun. Now I'm going to try to find my audio. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to play, this one is from my student. Actually, no, I'm going to play the one you just saw. And tell me if you can hear this. Oops, sorry, I wanted to start at the beginning. Here we go.
Rachel, I can't hear it. I'm
Nope.
not sure. Nope. Did you remember to hit share computer sound?
I don't know. Hang on.
Military conscription.
Oh, wait.
He was naturalized.
Can you hear it now?
I can hear it now.
Children were U.S. citizens.
I'm going to start it over because some people couldn't hear it. Sorry about that. Here we go.
First person singular. Opinions expressed are those of the commentator. Laurie Korn asks, when is a citizen not a citizen?
In 1910, my grandfather emigrated from Russia to the U.S. to escape the Tsar's 20-year military conscription for Jews. He was naturalized, and so by law, his children were U.S. citizens. He was manager of Kresge's in Toledo, Ohio, and was transferred to Kresge's in London, Ontario in 1914 at the onset of the Great War. There in Canada, my Aunt Rose was born. Grandpa's name was Teitelbaum, and a Canadian woman complained to Kresge's, "How can you have a German as a manager?" My grandfather wrote an editorial explaining that he was not a German, but a Jew. Kresge's promptly fired him. So he returned to Toledo with his burgeoning family, and life went on. Aunt Rose was a munitions worker during World War II, an organizer for civil rights, a Vietnam anti-war activist. She has voted in every election and now lives on Social Security. When she recently applied for an ID card at the DMV, they questioned her birth in Canada and asked for her naturalization papers. She has none. That's how, at age 91, my Aunt Rose found that according to new immigration law, she's not a citizen. And what's more, without proper documents, she can't attend her son's upcoming wedding, which will be held on an international cruise ship at dock in Florida. Rosie doesn't lose sleep over this nonsense. She just shrugs and says, "Never mind, I'll just sneak on board as a waitress." I think maybe it's this attitude that explains her long, hearty life. Rosie, keep on keeping on.
Laurie Korn is a writer living in Santa Cruz. If you would like to hear this or other pieces again, go to ksqd.org/first-person-singular. For first person singular, this is Matilda Rand.
So Matilda and Laurie are both here. And Laurie, I wonder if you can unmute yourself and just tell us, is your grandmother still alive? Or your aunt, I'm sorry.
No, she died around 3 years ago. So this was during the KUSP days. I wrote that actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was great. I went to see her every summer.
Nice. And it's coincidental that the next piece I'm going to play is from someone from Russia, a Russian immigrant who came here with his mother. I won't give away what happened next. There was no prompt for this except to tell something important to you. So let's listen to, this guy was 16 when he recorded this, and he is 19 now, I think maybe 20, and he's already a journalist. He was in college at 16, and he did this in Cabrillo. So let's give it a listen.
Many immigrants who come to the United States following the American dream find luck here. But little is heard about those that have the American dream fail them. My mom is one of those people. She grew up during the heyday of the Soviet Union under Nikita Khrushchev and Leonid Brezhnev. Working there as a nurse, she told me of how the government would try to take care of the working people, how most things were meant to simplify your life. Sometimes they failed, but most of the time they got it right. But when the Union collapsed, so did Soviet society. She decided to move to America. At first, she believed in the American dream, but that belief faded quickly. She described to me the time when she first landed in Houston, how the smell of vegetable oil and popcorn that hit her as she exited the plane made her think, "This is America. The air is supposed to be so fresh and clean here. Why does it stink so much?" Her expectations and the way she had viewed America were broken. Living in the United States, the system here has in the end made her poor and barely able to afford day-to-day life, to provide for her family. It has given her a myriad of things to worry and stress about, where the money for next month's rent and electricity might come from, how she will be able to afford simple repairs to her car. The only thing that living here has taught her is that the American dream is a lie.
So she eventually returned actually to Russia. So not every, seeking the American dream turns out perfectly. And I think that's his reality and his mother's reality. So I'm curious if you guys would like to just share some little insights or anything that this brings up for you when you're hearing these, or any questions you might have, about maybe something you're thinking of writing about. And then I'm going to continue on with some more slides that might give you a little bit of a format. And we're going to do some outline writing in a moment, sort of a way to sort of organize your ideas. But if anybody has questions or would like to say anything about what they're thinking already after listening to these, I would be curious. Of course, we'll have to keep it short because we have a lot of people, but I would like to hear from you at this point of any kind of sparks this might have sparked in your mind about who you might want to profile or what story you might be thinking about telling. And I'm going to rely on our helping person to see if anybody has their hand up.
Molly, go ahead. Oh, Molly, I might not have gotten to you in time. Hang on just a second. All right, there you go. Now try.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So at first I'm thinking, oh, I'm at least second or third born American. I don't have any immigration stories, but I do have Jewish stories. And I'm thinking about my father, and a very, very poignant story is coming up that I had completely forgotten about. So thank you for this. Yeah.
I am so happy to hear that. It can be quite emotional to dig some of these things out because this, there's some pretty intense connections we have with the past. Yeah. I think Amy, you have your hand up.
Amy, you'll have to go ahead and unmute yourself.
There you go.
So I just had a story come to me of my grandmother. She was a Holocaust survivor, and she really avoided talking about it. And then right the last few weeks of her life, she told me this story about her scar that one of her brothers had on his nose from mixing the jam that they were making. They would make these big vats of jam, all the family together in the country before the war. Yeah, so that's what I thought of.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Those little moments, you're cooking with grandma, you're cooking with your mother, you're sharing plants or recipes or mementos. That can be really powerful way to start a story. The other thing I noticed Jesse Stashenko did was he used dialogue. His mother was thinking out loud, this is supposed to be America. Why does it smell like old oil or whatever? Using little bits of dialogue that you remember that somebody said can be a really beautiful way to bring them alive in a short story like this.
Heather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about my husband and I were married for 9 years, and he felt no need to be a citizen. And then Donald Trump's presidency came, and there were suddenly executive orders. And I remember him asking one night, like, will I be with my family? Like, can we be separated? So that question led to him becoming a citizen. And it was not the circumstances I ever imagined him naturalizing in this country.
Yes. A lot of people, the last 4 years were galvanizing events in their lives because of what they had to go through and think about and hear said, by public officials. It's been intense. And people haven't really dealt with it. In some ways they have, but I think we're going to be processing the whole experience for a long time because it's ongoing. Yeah. Other thoughts, comments? Yeah, Karen. Would you like to talk? I see you're on the chat. Karen Adler, would you like to say something on?
Yeah, I was just waiting to be unmuted. Hi. So I have lots of little snippets of ideas, mostly about my grandparents. All four of my grandparents came to this country in the early part of the last century from Hungary and Austria, Jewish, but all Jewish families. And the one that keeps sticking in my mind is this story that we always heard about my grandfather. My grandfather and my grandmother on my mother's side got married in Austria, which I think at some different times has also been part of Poland. And they were on the boat, and he was sick the whole time. That's kind of the story we always heard, that he was sick the whole time. And in piecing together some family history, I was thinking about it over the last 15, 20 years. I think about this story, and they came in 1913, these grandparents, and the story now that I heard later was that they had just gotten married and got on the boat the same day, and then he was sick the whole time. And at some point, I think when I went to visit the tenement museum, and I had seen some pictures that reminded me of some family pictures, including my grandfather in a tenement, with lots and lots of sewing machines and garments hanging all over the place, and about 3 other men in that room with him. I suddenly started thinking about the dates, and they got married in January. They got on the boat. He was sick the whole time. And then I suddenly thought about the fact that my mother was born on October. She was their eldest child. She was born on October 24th, 1913. And I thought to myself, well, he couldn't have been that sick on the boat the whole time. So that's kind of my, I kind of started, adding things up, and that's kind of my story.
That would be a lovely thing to write. And you can put in details about the boat and feeling seasick and what you heard, and then what you finally figured out.
And that kind of leads to a question: is how much can we use our imaginations for these stories that we know actually took place, but have to kind of think about the fill in those details as imaginative details.
It's totally up to you. I think, as the Moth Radio Hour said, these stories are all true as told, so we kind of have to go with that. I think we have another question, and then I'm going to do a few more slides, and we're going to do some writing. So in the little time we have left, I really love these stories. I wish we had more time, such a short thing, but hopefully this is a spark that will lead you to go write and hand in this 240 words, and then you'll get to record it in your own voice. So,
Rachel, Virginia has her hand up, but I believe she wants to read her story.
Oh, sure, definitely. That'd be great.
I am working. My husband and I both working to give our full attention.
Hello?
To really ask anything at one
Hi,
time.
Virginia. We're getting some extra sound, so
I just turned it off.
Okay.
Okay, you should be okay now.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you could hear me or not.
Okay.
I have a lot of stories. People are always telling me to write them down. So I just want to say, when I got your email, I got pretty excited. Or when I heard about this, I got pretty excited about it, because I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and maybe actually I'll get it done. And I thought, what story to tell? So I thought real quickly, and I just came up with this in like an hour at 5 o'clock tonight. So I'll just read it to you, because I want to know what you think. Okay. After spending several years in a refugee camp in Salzburg, Austria, post-World War II, we found ourselves on the USS Longfeet, navigating the port of New York to a new life of freedom and safety in America. The ship's manifest tells me we had 10 bags among the 4 of us and 3 last names, but we were now a family. I was the youngest at not quite 1, along with my 6-year-old brother Helgi and my parents, Serafina and Janok. Janok and Serafina met in the camp where my father had set up a cobbler's shop after the war. He was officially labeled a displaced person, someone who had no home to return to. He feared death if he returned to the Soviet Union and his former life, as he had deserted the Russian army, escaped Siberia, and was eventually caught by the Germans. Because of his skills with leather, he was spared, employed by the German army as a bootmaker, and survived the war. He would use these skills to build a new life in America. My mother was an Austrian citizen who lived down the street from the displaced persons camp. She was 20 years younger than my dad, the classically beautiful young Fraulein, who sadly found herself a single mother at the end of the war. One day, Serafina went into my mother's shop to have her shoes repaired, and that's where my story begins.
Nice. I love it. You got so much in there. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's amazing. There's so much has happened to so many people who live here, and we don't always know that when you meet somebody. So thank you for sharing that. I'm always curious, to know more, but we don't have time. What did it look like? What did it feel like on the ship? Nobody knows, but what we can imagine it was like. Those are all things we can bring into it. As someone asked, can we imagine? Well, sometimes you have to fill in details. Sometimes you can do research and find out what ship they were on and learn something about it that they didn't tell you. So there are sometimes details you can find. That was beautiful. So you can turn these into Matilda, and she'll help you. And the way to do that, I'm going to give you the email in just a second. Let me share my screen again. Hopefully this will work this time easier than it did last time. Let me know if you can see that. Can you see that? Hope you can.
Yep, it looks great. Your chat's still on, though.
Oh, right. Okay. See that? Okay, so let's go through the various elements. Some of, the stories I played didn't have all of them, but, every story has some sort of conflict. So think about, what was the problem in the story? The problem for Jesse's mom was that she had an idea about what America was going to be like, and it wasn't. And it was really, really hard. So she ended up going back to Russia. So what was in the way of her goal is for the American dream? It sounds like economic opportunity was not there for her skill set. Life does not go in a straight line. So how do you overcome the obstacle? For her, she didn't. She left. She went back to her home country. But some people triumph. It's not a straight line. So there's usually a goal and there's an obstacle to that goal. And that's where the tension comes in. I have some people who live on my property who got married, and he's Canadian and she's American, and they had a terrible problem with immigration and almost couldn't marry each other, and almost were separated forever by problems with immigration. So, they have a whole story they could tell, but I don't know which piece of it they want to tell. The real conflict was, papers. So, and then every story has some sort of resolution. And this is where, at the end, you get to share what you learned. So the story we just heard ended with, and that's where my story begins, right? It was kind of a cliffhanger. I wanted to hear what happened next. But you kind of want to know, so how did it all work out? Or if it didn't work out, then what happened? So we need to sort of be left somewhere at the end of the story. If it wasn't overcome, okay, so looking back, what was learned? Is there anything we can learn from what happened? Right, so his mother didn't learn. She might have learned that America sucks and she doesn't like it. She wants to go home. That's her experience. Maybe someone else would have a different experience saying, I'm going to persevere and stay here no matter what. So here's an exercise we could start doing. It may take you longer than we have, but I thought, let's see, how are we doing on time? We have about 10 minutes, is that right?
It's about 7:45.
Oh, good. Okay, because I'm almost to the end of my slides, and I want to give you some time here. Think about a little foreshadowing to your story. If you've kind of got the idea, like some of you definitely do have what you want to write about or who you want to write about, think about a little hint you could drop at the beginning of the story about what the story is going to be about, but don't give it away. So if it's about, how your parents met, you could say, it's an unlikely place for two people to fall in love in a cobbler shop, but that's what happened to some very important people in my life. Don't give it away, but just drop a little bit of a hint that grabs us at the beginning of the story. And then you're going to want to introduce your character. And rather than just say, my dad was 15, well, what did he look like? Is there one thing about him that made him special, or that person that you're writing about? So did they have a particular way of talking, or can you remember what it sounded like when they spoke? Did they have an accent? You can even put their accent in the story. But you do want to imbue your character. And if that character is you, and you're going to be talking about your own personal experience as an immigrant, tell us when this happened. What were you like? What were you? How old were you? What did you look like? So try to create a character. And then every good story needs a setting. And because it's radio, the more descriptive you can get in the setting, the better we feel like we can imagine it in our mind's eye. And just like cooking, you don't want to add too many spices. You don't want to pile on the descriptive stuff in a story. But if you can get one little gem in there, like the way her, special earrings glittered on her ears, it was this purple opal that someone gave her when she was 15, or something we can imagine. An object or a smell. Like she said, the smell of cooking oil when she got off the plane really made her sick. She couldn't understand how America smelled this way. That's the reason she didn't like it here. It smelled bad to her. That's really powerful. You don't need much, just a little teeny sensory detail. So how did it look or feel or smell or sound? Was the crunching of shovels the first thing he heard when he arrived? Was it the sound of the immigration guy's badge clicking open? What was the one moment that there was a detail that you can tell that will shed light on the whole story? And then there's kind of like the sequential stuff. Most of us go straight to number 4, like first this happened and then this happened, and that's an important sequential part of your story, but it's not really necessary because in this short of a time, you don't really have time to tell everything that happened, right? You probably have time for 1 or 2 things that happened. The more you try to cram into your story, the less we will be able to follow it, right? This isn't genealogy. This is telling a good tale so that you can get like one kernel of aha, wow, that's really special out of it. So think about the simplest bit that you can tell of that story and try to hone in on it in a way that you don't need to get everything in there. Like when I was talking about my grandmother coming over and being in school, that was a micro story, and her whole life had so much more to it than that. But that was just a symbol of how people were treated that didn't speak English when they arrived here. Describe the conflict in a way that, you don't say, well, this was in her way. You just show it. That's what they always say in writing classes, show, don't tell. So what can you show that's happening? Maybe a bit of dialogue that's showing the conflict. And then, of course, how does it end? What is learned? Reflect on its meaning. I think 7 is the most important part of the story. You can have a very spare story and still have a really powerful ending. Like, what does this all mean anyway? Does it mean America's a horrible place? Does it mean we can't create a new country out of a people from a bunch of different countries? Or does it mean somehow we're going to figure this out, how to all live together? So reflecting on bigger themes at the end, I think ties it together. It doesn't have to be like a pat moral to the story, but it needs to have some sort of, what does this mean in the bigger picture? Even if it's one sentence at the end. So think about that as kind of the ending. And I'll give you a few minutes now to kind of maybe try to write some of this. Is that okay? Would that be useful? If I'm talking, you're probably not going to want to write. So you can type me questions in the chat if you don't know where to begin or you want to ask a question, but we'll be quiet for a little while you get some ideas down. Maybe use this as a device to start your story. I don't think we'll end your story today, but it'll get you started. So I think I want to move on to the last few slides, and hopefully we got you going anyway. I know that writing is a long process for many of us and takes a lot of thought and care, especially when it's something so personal. So I recognize that this is just a little spark to get you going. And I'm happy to share my slides with anybody who would like to get a copy of the presentation. I'm going to share another couple slides with you. And then we will have a few moments for questions and discussion at the end. So the next step after you get that outline done would be to do a free write. Just get the juices flowing. Just start to write. And of course, it's going to be longer than 240 words, and that's okay. I wouldn't write if you wrote a 5-page story, it'd be really hard to shrink it down to 240 words. So part of this is synthesizing it down to just like really the most juicy, wonderful phrases and things. And again, if you try to tell a micro story, like one moment in time that stands in for a big moment, you'll be a lot better off than if you try to tell their whole life story, because that's just not possible and it doesn't do them any justice. But if you just try to get a feeling, we used to call it 2 laughs and a cry or 2 cries and a laugh. If you even get one of those in writing, you've struck gold. So I often cry when I hear these kind of stories because it just reminds me how we are all immigrants. We are all here from other places, and we are all trying to make a new place a wonderful place to be, and it can be challenging and amazingly emotional. So I'm happy to share my email with you. If you would like to be in touch, I'll send you this. So
Rachel, there is a question.
Oh yeah, please.
The question says, so it's better to start micro instead of whittling down?
I would, because you can write the big arc of their story, but what part of it, the micro parts are kind of stand-ins for bigger things. So if that one moment when it was the last time you talked to your grandma on her deathbed, that's a micro moment, but it stands in for your relationship with her, right? So, or maybe you're cooking with her, or maybe you're celebrating someone's quinceañera, or maybe you are, so there's some event that stands in for everything you want to talk about, but it can be a lens through which you see that other stuff. Does that make sense? I hope I made sense. The other thing you can do is like read it aloud to a friend or to the mirror. And if it sounds good, it probably is good. And your friend hopefully will be honest with you. But I think because this is spoken word storytelling, you really want it to sound good. And that's why if the person closes their eyes and listens to you, that's how someone might hear you on the radio. They won't see you. So you might have them close their eyes. Read it to a friend or loved one. Yeah. A little gem. You're looking for little gems, little sparks of moments that are significant and loaded with emotion and stories, but they stand in for a bigger thing, right? I've heard stories of people talking about the taste of one particular food, right, that their grandmother made. And as soon as they ate it, they remembered her, right? So that can be a great beginning to a story. So here again is the slide that will help you get in touch with Matilda and Lori. Matilda or Lori, did you want to say anything more about the process people can expect to go through? I think I wrote it in the chat, but in case people... Yeah, someone wrote a slice of life, not the whole pie. Absolutely. I had a student write a story about watching 2 people on a bus who were looking at their phones, but they should have got fallen in love. And it was just the most beautiful story. And it was all about how everyone's on their phones. But instead of saying, everyone's always on their phones, it's so terrible, no one talks to each other, she imagined this whole love story where they put down their phones and started talking about the farmer's market vegetables they just bought. And that developed into a friendship, which developed into a love relationship, and they got married. And all of this was going through her head in the story, but all she was doing was watching 2 people sit next to each other and ignore each other. And it was so poignant because she just took this one moment, and it was about all of that stuff, right? But it was just one moment.
So you want me to say something?
If you want to add anything.
Sure. Yeah. Both Lori and I are really excited about the program. We have helped a lot of people, both, sometimes with some editing, because, it doesn't, when you write, it doesn't necessarily translate as well than when you read it or speak it. So we help people with that. And we have another person, Margie Curry Marshall, who is very good at that and has done it for many years. So, there's help there. And then when we help you record it, either on your own device or invite you to the studio, it's a lot of fun. It doesn't take much to record it. Some people are done in 15 minutes and other people want to do it several times. So we give you time and space to really get it down to where you want it. You can hear it. And then we add something in the beginning and at the end. And you heard that in Laurie's story about her aunt Rosie, that what we do. And then afterwards, we sometimes set it at a day special. Recently we had one and it was on that person's birthday and it was just made him so, happy. So we do that sometimes. And also after it's recorded, it plays on one day, which means in the morning and in the evening. So it plays twice. But then the story isn't gone. We then put it on a blog, which everybody has access to. And it will stay there with the specific date. We'll put a picture to it, either in collaboration with the person who wrote it, or we choose a picture that goes with it. And it really has an incredible impact on us, but also on our listeners. I often meet people in the street say, "Oh, I recognize your voice. Saying I heard you on the radio, and I love first person synchronized." And then I of course say, "Go ahead and write something." That's the hard part. So these people here are a lot more motivated, and I'm looking forward to see every one of you. Right, Laurie?
Yes. Please, yes. Yes. I love it.
I also wanted to mention again that we have a program on family stories called Family Sparks, and it's on once a month on Monday nights. It's hosted by a guy named Daniel Spels, and he loves interviewing people about their family stories. So I can give you his email if you'd like. If you think that you have more than 240 words in you and you want to share and be interviewed, he's really good at interviewing people about their family stories. So let me see if I can, if I can share his email. If people are interested, I'm sure he would be really happy to hear from you. So there is Dan Spels's email. He's very much interested in, the research part and the family tree, and doing all that. But he likes to interview people about their family stories. So that's another way to kind of talk about your family and what you experienced and what they experienced. So I know we are out of time now, but if people wanted to stay, I want to honor your time, and I wanted to thank you all for showing up. This is really exciting, and I too will really look forward to hearing your stories on the radio. I will stay behind another 10 minutes or so if people want to chat. The rest of you, if you need to go, I will not feel at all bad because this was supposed to end at 8. But I want to thank you and thank the Santa Cruz and Watsonville Public Libraries for having me. I really enjoyed being with you tonight.
All right, and as Rachel mentioned, we will stay on for a few minutes afterwards, but I'd like to give Diane Cowan a chance to come back on and say a couple of words. Diane, go ahead.
You've unmuted me. Good. Wow, that was such a great workshop. Rachel, I cannot thank you enough. I learned so much in just this short hour, and I was really just amazed with some of the stories I've heard here. And I also just want to thank all of you for coming to the storytelling workshop today. As you can see on the slide, we hope that you will take a look at the rest of our Book to Action events coming up, including another discussion with Rachel about the Pastures of Plenty radio show that she talked about at the beginning. And then also, of course, our big author event with Jose Antonio Vargas will be on Thursday, June 24th. And we hope you can join us for that. We definitely hope you will submit your story to KSQD's first person singular to share with the entire community. And so you can see the website there for finding out about Book to Action, bit.ly/SCPL B OOK, the number 2, capital A CTION, Book to Action. We also encourage you to please take the survey when you receive it in a follow-up email after this event. It really does help us improve our programs and services. And I look forward to seeing you in other programs soon.
Thank you, Diane. And someone had a question, when can they submit these? As soon as you have it done, you can submit it. And there's no too late either, because even if this 2-month period where we're doing immigration stories is over, we would still be very interested in your story. So don't feel like if you can't turn it around, in the next 2 months that you can't submit it. It's always an open invitation, but we would love to have the next 2 months be kind of wall to wall, first person singular immigration stories if possible. So hopefully we'll have a bunch of them from you all. Hi, I recognize some folks. Hi, Dana. I know your partner, Mimi. Nice to see you. I remember you from the Wokes house, I think. Hi. Anyone have any questions or anything they wanted to share before we go tonight? Thank you, Marian.
And I'm just reminding everyone, if you have a question that you'd like to ask open mic, just raise your hand.
So Margaret Q, you had your hand up.
Margaret Q. Hang on
Marian
just a second. Margaret Q, you'll have to unmute your mic.
There you go.
Yeah, so I was super excited about this. I'm an Irish immigrant, and this was like a trip down memory lane. I could smell the taxi that I came to the airport in. The cold smoke stench taxi that drove me. I still remember what the taxi man even said, and I hadn't thought about that for decades. So we Irish are great. We have gifts of the gab, but we also tend to do this run-on sentence thing, and we can't get anything into 240 words. So how do I get around that?
Maybe you have to do parts 1, 2, and 3. I don't know. You could try, just try telling a friend and set your stopwatch and then record yourself just talking extemporaneously. And then you can transcribe it. Sometimes people speak more easily than they write. Mm-hmm. So if that's you, that is a technique that I have found to be very useful. I would love to hear your story, and you have a lovely accent. What part of Ireland are you from?
I come from one of the poor old parts of Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
I left in the 80s when the young Irish people left in droves. We're like the second wave of the famine, basically.
Right. Before the oil sea boom, North oil sea boom happened in the late 80s and 90s. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My husband lived down in the south part of Ireland for 10 years. He lived in, what's that little town? Anyway, yeah, we play Irish music.
Yeah.
Okay, Marian, you had a question. You got to mute yourself. Unmute yourself. Sorry.
Do you actually count words like even a and the and it and everything, or what?
It's more that they try to get it under 90 seconds, and that's how fast most people read. So you can time yourself if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I see Margie Kern Marshall was here, but she's not in the room. Her office is here. Maybe she could answer that better than I could, but I'm pretty sure 90 seconds is what they're after.
And I still see Margie in the list.
Yeah, but she's walking around her house, maybe.
Margie, if you can hear us.
Hey,
we have a question for
Margie!
you. And then Virginia, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can.
I just wanted to say, if you use Microsoft Word to write your story, it does a word count for you. So that's just a tip if you are worried about how many words to write, because I was watching my word count as I wrote my story.
Yeah. And I suggest trying to write it to, just write, and then you can shave it down. But, I don't suggest writing 5 pages because it's hard then to condense it. But if you wrote, 300 words, that's easier. You can then peel away sentences and whittle it down.
But that wasn't my question. My question was the email Dan Spice. Can you clarify what that's about?
Oh, Dan Spells. Yeah, he is a host of a program called Family Sparks, where he interviews people about their family stories, not just immigration stories, but all types. I mean, he's had people on of all walks from all places, and a lot of them have done a lot of research into their family history or have interesting family stories. So that's who that is. And you can tell him that you learned about him through this workshop, so he doesn't wonder where he's getting people. I mean, I think it's great because this is a perfect match of people interested in telling their family stories and someone who has a program about that.
Okay, thank you.
And then Diane, you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to mention about Dan also that he's also a member of the Santa Cruz County Genealogical Society, whose main existence is at our downtown Santa Cruz library. And they offer appointment. I mean, once we'll be opening to allow people in on June 16th. And I'm not sure exactly when our genealogy volunteers will be staffing the office, but he is one of them. There are others that can also help you do the research for your family histories. And they also put on a monthly program, many of which are either about storytelling or research, and they just do really great work. And I wanted to give them a little plug, and there you go. There you go.
There's also a program on KSQD on Tuesday afternoons at 3 called Kitchen Sisters. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but they do a lot of really personal stories and unnarrated. It's just beautiful. And they use a lot of sound and music. And if you've never heard that show, they do a lot of storytelling on that show, and it's really beautiful. So Kitchen Sisters, Nikki Silva is an award-winning producer who happens to live in La Selva Beach. And her program is on our airwaves once a week. It's always amazing. She'll take, someone cooking or someone talking about being a girl, and it just becomes this deep thing that's all about, I can't even describe it. It's just beautifully textured in terms of the audio production and the storytelling. Danielle, did you want to say something? Is that a hand up? Or I see a clapping hand, but is that also, did you want to say something?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great.
I've tried to write my story before, and I've read it to somebody who was in a writing group, and they said it was interesting, but I've been reading this book, Dear America, and was really touched because he talks about how he becomes totally American in a very short period of time. And I did the same thing. And he talks about compartmentalizing your different parts of your life. And that's something I've done too. And I have a hard time getting in touch with the feelings. I can write descriptive, but I can't get into that thing that makes people go, oh, wow. I don't even know how to start. I was born in Dublin, on the south side of Dublin, in a middle-class family. So I had my my story is not the usual story of a lot of hardships, although we had a lot of hardships along the way, but not the usual story. And I'd really like to write it for my children, my grandchildren, but I don't know how to like open up and do that.
I think you just start free writing anything. Don't edit yourself. I think that's the problem a lot of people have, is they have this editor on their shoulder saying, oh, don't write that. That's not descriptive. You got to flick those editors off your shoulder and just tell them to leave you alone and just write it. Just get it out. And then you can pick a part of it if you want to share it in this context, or maybe you just want to give it to your relatives so they know what you experienced. That is so valuable. I have to say, and I forgot to say this in the workshop, I interviewed, I taped,
thank you.
I taped my parents, I taped my mother, I taped my grandmother and my grandfather, and I have all those interviews that I did, and I'm so glad because now I have their voice on tape and I know some of their stories, which at the time I wasn't ready to memorize. So highly recommended that either you do it if you're an elder, or you ask your elders to tell you their stories and get them on. So easy to record them on a phone now because everybody has a recorder on their phone. So highly recommended. Yeah, thank you for that. It's amazing we have two people that are from Dublin in the same workshop. I don't know if you know each other, but that seems like a coincidence. Plus we had two people talking about being Russian immigrants. So pretty amazing. And just this little microcosm of this workshop in Santa Cruz, we have people from all over the place, which shows you, that we don't always get seen, and people don't always show up as immigrants in their daily lives. We just think we're all Americans, and we are, but we don't always see each other's other story, right? That's kind of what this is about, is that we're Americans and we're a lot more than that, right? Because this place is the place people came to from somewhere else, unless they're Native Americans. And that's why anybody who says, that we're all Americans and wants to erase where we're from, somehow mistaken, because they lose all the beauty and interesting nuance that we all brought with us and our relatives brought with them. And that stuff is still around. It's still part of us. And by telling it, we surface it, right? We amplify it. We show who we are as a community. We get to see who's here. It's almost like, who's around? Who lives here? I didn't know that. When I did my Pastors of Plenty piece, I had no idea there was this huge Croatian community in Watsonville that had basically started the apple industry here. And they had never farmed apples before. They had no idea how to farm. They were not farmers. They were from urban areas of the Dalmatian coast. But they needed a business, and so they figured out how to grow apples. So I didn't know that, and now I have a whole appreciation for when I drive around the apple fields of Watsonville about who lives there and why all the names are Skurich and Lakovich, and they are that for a reason. Those are the first people to do those businesses there. Yeah. So thank you for letting me see even more of my home by hearing from you. That was really sweet. If anyone else wants to share, they can. If not, we'll probably call it a night, and thank you so much for attending, and say we will hopefully see you at one of these other events, including the discussion of Pastors of Plenty in July. Thanks, Diane. Thanks to all of you. It's really nice to meet you.